In this video, we will talk about methods in general, the basics of methods in Java. What are methods? How do we write a method? And what is the purpose of writing a method? So before we understand how to write a method, let's just focus on the purpose of a method. Why do we need a method in Java? So in very simple terms, whenever we have to do something, uh, maybe a task, maybe some functionality, so we bundle that logic uh, and we put that logic in a method so that if we need to execute the same thing, we can simply call that method, and that will execute a series of steps to do something, to achieve a certain state, to execute a certain task. In Java, a method is equivalent to the behavior of a class, a behavior of an object. So let's say if we have a class named dog, then we know the behavior of the dog is to bark. So bark is a method. In Java, we have classes, then we have objects of those classes. We know that whatever variables we have defined in a class, and whenever we initialize an object of that class, that object has a state. That object has a state. Whatever the value of those variables are, it is basically the state of that object. And many times the state of an object changes from uh, one state to another, and we use methods to change the state. So that is the purpose of a method. Now, what exactly is a method? What are different parts of a method declaration? So each method has a name. Each method has a return type. It may or may not have a return type, but still there will always be a keyword in the Java declaration of a method which will tell us what is the return type of a method. A method may have an access modifier, whether it is a public method that anyone can use it, or is it a private method not accessible to others. A method may or may not accept arguments, the input arguments. So let's say if we have a method calculate, then it will accept some input arguments, some numbers, maybe two numbers, maybe three numbers, to calculate the sum, or maybe to multiply them. And then the method has a body, which is basically the logic written inside the body of a method. So let's write a method, and let's try to understand certain bits and pieces of method declaration. So it may or may not have the access modifier. Let's say in this case the access modifier is public. Then comes the return type. So in this case, this is a valid method uh, in Java. This is the access modifier. It means the method is public and anyone can access it. Void in Java means that this method doesn't return anything. Whenever we have to write a method with no return value, we uh, we write void as a method return type. M is the name of the method, and this is something, it says that it doesn't accept any argument. So this is a no argument method. We start the body with curly brace and end the body with the closing curly brace, and inside the body we write our logic. So let's say in this case we are simply printing SOP calling M. So this is a very simple method. Another example would be public void M1 int a SOP accepting input. This is another method. The access modifier is public. Return type is still void, meaning this method won't return anything. The name of the method is M1. In this case, it is accepting an input argument of type integer. A is the name of that variable, and the body is simply to print what this method accepted as the input argument. So it will simply print the value being passed to this method. Another example of a method in Java would be, let's say, int n1, int n2. So in this method we have again the access modifier public. Now it has a return type of integer. It means whenever we call this method, we expect a return value of type integer. We expect an int as a result. This is the name of the method sum. It accepts two arguments. In the body we declared another temporary variable or a local variable which simply holds the result of n1 plus n2, and then we return the value. So to return the value from a method we use the keyword return. Now how do we call a method? So to call a method we simply write the name of the method and pass the required arguments. So let's say in this case, if we have to call this method from another class or from another code, we would simply write code like this. In this case, name of the method, and because it accepts an input argument, so maybe we simply pass it 10. In this case, name of the method, it accepts two arguments, so we have to pass two integer values. So let's say 4 comma 6. That's how we call the method. Now the thing is, because this method doesn't return anything, it's void, so we don't need to store the return value, and on the console it will simply print calling m. In this case again this is a void method, so on the console we will get the output that accepting input 10 because we passed 10 as input argument. But in this case we pass two values and we expect some value in return of type integer, which is basically the sum of the number. So we can actually declare a variable, let's say int result, and we will call the method something like this. So when this method execution is finished, in this variable of type int we will have the output of the sum. So we can simply do anything we want in the calling code. So we may be just printing the output something like this, and on the console we'll get the output 10, which is basically the sum of the input arguments. So this is basically the basics of method, how we write methods, return type, accepting arguments and return types, and how do we call them. In the next lesson we will talk about nested method calling. We will understand the use of method stack and how to call methods in different ways, in nested ways, one method inside another method, and maybe just instead of passing the input argument as simple as that, we may have another method call that will return something and that will be passed to another method. So that's it for now. Thank you.